Hey folks, Lenny Lawson here, the car guru, and I am considering something that I should not be considering, but it is under consideration. I'm considering trading my F-150 for, I know, this is going to sound weird. I'm going to say it anyway. I'm trading my F-150 for a Maverick. I'm going from a full-size truck to a small truck. Why? I just drove a Maverick with the 2-liter four-cylinder engine, the 9-speed automatic transmission. It's got leather seats. It's got Apple CarPlay, which is the most important thing to me. The steering wheel feels marvelous. You know, it's just little things like that. It's just the smoothest leather. The transmission shifts good. It's got plenty of power. It gets 35 miles to the gallon. I can put a little bed cover on it. No, I can't haul as much in it or tow as much with it as I can my F-150. But, here's the but, I own a Ford dealership. Sometimes I forget that. I can actually buy the Maverick, drive it for however long I like to drive them, usually 2 years, and borrow an F-150 or 250 when I go camping. See? I'm making plans. I don't think my wife will like it, though, because, well, I think the grandkids will be too tight in the back seat. So I've got to pick them up at school occasionally, and we have 3 that we're picking up. And so they're in the little booster seats. And the booster seats, I think, are too wide for the distance between the seat belts. So there'll be some fussing going on. Move over! I can't get my seatbelt fastened. I've heard that so many times. I'm just about over it. But I do like picking up the grands and taking them to the house, and then we start our activities. Well, maybe I won't have to pick them up if I have too small of a vehicle. But yeah, I mean, it's just, if you need a little truck occasionally, but you still want to drive an SUV, a small SUV, the Maverick is just about perfect. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Ford dealer. I don't know that there's anything else out there on the market. We're also a Nissan dealer, so we do sell the Nissan Frontier. They eliminated the Nissan Titan full-size truck. It didn't sell. And so then we have, of course, the F-150, 250, 350, and so on. And then we have the Ford Ranger. And the Ranger is bigger. Not as big as the F-150. The Maverick is a small, but it's perfect for what most people need. Well, I got to have a trunk. Well, you do have a trunk. All you have to do is buy a bed cover. And you've got probably the biggest trunk that you've ever had. The bed of a Ford Maverick, sealed with a rough country bed cover. It's perfect. And of course, I'm biased. Perfect place to buy it is at Gateway Ford in Greenville, Tennessee. But if you live in northern Montana, then you might have to go to Billings or Helena, whatever. I don't even know where. Those are the only cities I could think of in Montana. And that's only because I watched the show Yellowstone, because I like Kevin Costner. But I didn't like him much in Yellowstone. Okay, let's talk about cars for a minute. Well, for several minutes. So this is a tutorial program. For those of you who don't know anything about cars, I'm getting ready to educate you a little bit. Now, this is a small segment of what we do for the teen drivers that come to our teen driving experience at Gateway, which was a huge success. I got people coming out of the woodwork wanting me to do another one, and I'm going to. I'm going to do probably 4 a year, and we may expand it into some actual driving. Why do we call it the teen driving experience? Because we don't drive. We just talk about everything else about cars. It's car safety, being a responsible citizen on the road. We tell them how their car works. We talk about engines and transmissions. We give them a tour of the underside of an automobile. Could you use that? Would you like to know how a lot of this stuff works? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the drivetrain. No, it's not a choo-choo train. It's what makes your car go down the road. It's a combination of systems that make your car go down the road. And personally, I think it's important for you to know basically how they work. So it's the engine, It's the transmission, and it's the drive axle or the differential. Now, front-wheel drive cars and all-wheel drive vehicles and rear-wheel drive vehicles are different. They all have engines. They all have transmissions. But the other components are kind of different. Like, well, I said they all have transmissions. The front-wheel drive vehicle that you're driving probably right now has an engine and something called a transaxle. Why do they call it a transaxle? Well, because the transmission and the drive axles are made together in the same case. They're all one component. Really two things in one package. Whereas if it's a rear-wheel drive vehicle, and I do get tongue-twisted saying that, so don't laugh. A rear-wheel drive vehicle has a separate transmission and rear axles, differential, and so forth. Okay, so it's already getting confusing. So let's just start with the engine. So the engine needs four things, to be able to function, provide power. And that's fuel, obviously. It could be diesel, or it could be gas, or it could be natural gas. What else? That's about it. That's all that's relatively common as far as fuels are concerned for internal combustion engines. And it also needs air. Got to have air. It's just like a fire. You know, when you light a fire, it's got to have fuel. It's got to have, let's say, wood or coal, and it needs oxygen, or you got no fire. Well, the engine needs oxygen, and it needs fuel, and it also needs a spark, which creates the final thing that's needed, and that's compression. So these things make your engine go. The engine basically converts reciprocal energy, or motion, I should say, reciprocal motion. That's up and down, side to side, okay? That's the piston going up and down inside the engine. It's going up and down reciprocally, something like that. And then that converts the reciprocal motion into a circular motion. And believe it or not, that takes a lot of moving parts. I remember when they first introduced the rotary engine, which is a totally different engine design. It has 3 internal moving parts. The typical V6 engine has 223 moving parts. So you can understand why there could be some problems as far as long-term maintenance, and especially if you didn't keep clean oil in there. Oil makes it all work. I should say that that's one of the main components. You got to have lubrication. You know, those of you who forget about your oil changes and, go longer periods of time between oil changes, you're just making your engine last less. You're reducing the life. You're reducing the efficiency because those parts have to be lubricated. So all of this motion that goes from reciprocal to rotational is forced out the back of the engine through something called a flywheel. I know it's in these names. Don't ask me how they ever came up with flywheel. There's probably a good reason. But that's where something called the transmission is connected. Now, we're talking about a rear-wheel drive vehicle, okay? That's where the transmission is connected. So, if you didn't have a transmission, and you just had one gear, and it was connected to the engine and went straight back to the drive axles in the back, then as soon as you connected the engine to the drive axle, you're going. There is no neutral. The transmission allows a car to sit there, and many cars, if you put it in drive and it's just sitting there, you don't even have to have your foot on the brake. It'll just sit there until you give it gas. Now, a lot of cars won't do that. But so you put your foot on the gas and the car takes off. Hey, Lenny, how come it doesn't take off until you put your foot on the gas? Good question. Because there's this thing between the transmission and the engine. You know what it's called? It's called a torque converter, full of fluid, and it has vanes like imagine a windmill, okay? Imagine two windmills facing each other, okay? There's nothing between them but air. Well, if one windmill starts turning and starts blowing air, do you think it's going to have any effect on the other windmill? Yes, it is. It's going to cause that other windmill to start turning. Now, it won't be an instant reaction, and it won't be 100% efficient, because for every time that the first windmill spins around, the second windmill is not going to spin around. There's going to be a little bit of a lag there. This is exactly what happens inside of a torque converter. And in reality, there is no metallic connection between the flywheel, which is connected to the engine, and all the gears in the transmission. Because of that torque converter, it's fluid. Your car, your truck, your SUV is being driven by fluid. Is that not incredible? I'm going to take my first break, and we will continue in just 1 minute. Okay, Lenny, you lost me at transaxle. Oh, yeah. We were talking about a rear-wheel drive vehicle that the energy is transferred from the engine to a transmission, right? What about that transaxle? Same thing. It's just and it still has a torque converter, but the transaxle is for front-wheel drive vehicles. If you don't have a transaxle and you have just a regular transmission hooked to a differential, then that's for rear-wheel drive vehicles. There's another little component, however, that is connected. Well, it's not a little component. It's got a lot of gears in it. It's connected to the transmission. It's called a transfer case. What's that do? Well, now in a typical rear-wheel drive vehicle, all the power is going to the rear wheels. But if you have four-wheel drive, you want some of that power, especially when it's slick outside, going to the front wheels. That's what a transfer case does. It takes the rotational motion in the transmission using a bunch of gears to send power to the front differential. Yeah, it's just like the one in the back, except it's in the front, and it spins the front wheels when you want it to. Well, Lenny, what about all-wheel drive? Well, that's same thing, except the computer on the vehicle. We didn't have all-wheel drive, 30 years ago. That's a new creation because we have computers that tell the vehicle what to do. If the rear wheels start to slip, there's a computer that senses that. Matter of fact, it is directly fed from the wheel sensors for the anti-lock brake system. That's how the computer knows that the rear wheels are spinning and not moving the vehicle forward. So what happens is that transfer case kicks in, sends power to the front wheels, and then you start going. Now, Lenny, what if it's a front-wheel drive vehicle to begin with? There's still a transmission. There's still a transfer case. But when the front wheels start spinning, it sends power to the rear wheels. So it's all the same things. It's just a slightly different configuration. So when you are shifting an automatic transmission, for example, which most of you have, most of you do not have manual transmissions. So when you shift gears, you put it in drive. Your transmission is either computer controlled or hydraulically controlled, and it starts out in first. And then when you accelerate, it uses transmission fluid and pressure to shift gears, or it's done electronically. Most modern vehicles are done electronically. Now, there are different types of transmission. There's something called a CVT, continuously variable transmission. It's kind of like a transmission in a four-wheeler or a side-by-side. It doesn't have gears. It has cones and belts. I know, that sounds weird. But it has an infinite number of gears that it can go through. It's not limited to like a 3-speed or a 5-speed or a 10-speed like our F-150. So it is, like I say, it's continuously variable. It's a good definition for what it does. Are they reliable? They are if you keep them serviced. Very sensitive to contamination. And if you're driving a Honda CR-V or a Toyota RAV4, Nissan Rogue, most small cars, they use CVTs. Now, the Maverick that I'm thinking about buying, I looked on the window sticker, and it says it has a 2-liter V6 or a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, turbocharged, and the transmission is a 9-speed. So it is not a CVT. So are CVTs bad? Like I said, no, they're not bad. You just have to be very diligent as far as keeping them serviced. So we're transferring power, right? If we have a manual transmission vehicle, the separation between the engine, the flywheel on the engine, and the transmission is done with a clutch. So, when the clutch is let out, if you're in neutral, they're not connected. The engine is not connected to the transmission. But if you push the clutch in, put it in first gear, let the clutch out, whoa, they're connected. And the vehicle's either going to die or it's going to go down the road if you let the clutch out smoothly enough. This is one of the big problems with young people, old people, learning how to drive a manual, because they have to slowly engage that clutch. There's a point where you're pushing down the gas and letting out the clutch, where that clutch really starts to engage, and you just have to learn that technique and that feel. And it's tougher on a hill because the vehicle starts rolling backwards before you have the clutch out, and you just have to find that point. People who can drive manuals understand what I'm talking about. Really, what's going on with a clutch is very similar to what's going on with a torque converter. It's just one is done automatically and the other one's done with your right foot and your left foot. I think it's important for everybody to learn how to drive a manual. I think it's a more engaging experience. When I say that, some people would rather it not be engaging because they don't like driving in the first place. They see a car as going from point A to point B. When I ordered my new Porsche, I ordered a manual transmission. I could get an automatic. It's called a PDK. It's got paddle shifters, and it's got dual clutches built into it. It's a different setup. It does not have a torque converter like your car probably does. But it's a different type of experience, and one that I didn't want. I want to be able to shift gears. It's just more fun. So beyond the transmission, you have a drive shaft. If it's a rear-wheel drive vehicle, you have a drive shaft that is connected directly to the transmission. Whatever the transmission is sending it, the drive shaft is following right along. It sends it to an odd-looking stump called a rear differential. It's got a bunch of gears in it that converts the rotation of the drive shaft to where it will actually turn the axles that go to the wheels. It's really kind of neat looking on the inside. It uses a ring gear and a pinion gear and a bunch of other gears to make this happen. Now, lots of rear-wheel drive vehicles have something called posi traction or limited slip differential. If you're in the snow or on ice, if you're in a rear-wheel drive vehicle and one of the wheels starts to spin, the other wheel just stops. It's not happy. It just sits there while the other wheel is spinning. If you have a limited slip or a locking differential, then as soon as that wheel starts to spin, the other one will continue to spin. Will continue to pull. It's got power. So you got power with both of those rear wheels touching the tires, touching the road. Now, if that happens on a modern vehicle and it's got all-wheel drive, it's going to send a message to the onboard computer and say, hey, we need the front wheel spinning, please. And that's what it does. The transfer case says, okay, I'll send power to the front wheels. And it does. And that's why you're able to go. Is all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, is it foolproof on ice and snow and stuff like that? No, you can still get stuck, especially if you do something silly. But that's how all of that stuff works. And, of course, the engine has a lot of requirements. Mostly has to do with keeping it cool and keeping it lubricated. So important, folks, to keep those fluids fresh and clean. the filters, using good high-quality filters. I always recommend using OEM parts or original manufactured parts. If I have a GM car, it's going to have a GM filter on it. If I have a Honda, it's going to have Honda filters. Air filter, cabin filter, fuel filter, everything is going to be from the factory. That's why you will never see Lenny Lawson go into a quick lube place, because they do not stock factory filters. I'll be back in just 1 minute. Okay, I am back. So the engine has requirements, so there's a transmission, with a couple things that you might want to be aware of. Transmissions get hot, especially when you're towing something. And there are a lot of people that will put a transmission cooler on there. They want to keep the fluid in the transmission cool. It has lines that go from the transmission to something that looks like a little radiator out there in front of the grill, right in front of the regular radiator. It's in the front of the car. So the fluid goes all the way to that cooler, cools down, and makes it a little trip back, goes back into the transmission. A lot of modern trucks have a temperature gauge for the transmission on their instrument panel. That's why that's important, especially, like I say, when you're towing. And then the rear differential, there's no way to really monitor the temperature or, as far as the fluid. It doesn't have a cooling system. It just has oil in it. It doesn't tend to get hot, but it can. If you've got a bearing that starts to go bad, or you have a lot of stress on the rear diff because you're towing something heavy, then that can cause issues there. That's the forgotten fluid. The ones that don't have a dipstick, the only way to check it is to either get up underneath the car and pull out an inspection plug, or to have a technician check it for you when it's on a lift. But all of these fluids have maintenance requirements, all of them, and you should be aware of them. There's a page in your owner's manual that tells you when these fluids are supposed to be inspected or replaced, and you need to follow that. Anybody makes any other suggestions to you about when to change your fluids and so forth, I wouldn't pay much attention to them. My problem is that the factory says you don't need to change. Well, like on my F-150, I don't need to change my oil until the light comes on. No, thank you. Or it's 7,500 miles. Also, no, thank you. I'm changing the oil every 5,000 miles and rotating my tires at the same time. It's easy for me to remember, and I just think it's better for the vehicle. Now, if it's a brand new vehicle, I'm changing the oil at 2,500 miles. I'm not waiting for 5,000 miles, because those engines, when they're bored out, all those cylinders and all that work done inside the engine, all these new parts, little pieces of metal shavings accumulate in the oil pan. That's why the oil drain plug is typically magnetic. So when you pull that thing out, just look at it. Get the technicians to show it to you. Get your first oil change at 2,500 miles and have them pull out that drain plug, and before they wipe it off, have them show it to you and see if there's any metal on it. If it is, I hope you don't have a problem, but it's a good thing you changed your oil at 2,500 miles. Well, I hope this was somewhat informative. Many of you already know about all this stuff, but most of you don't, and that's why you listen. Call me if you need me, 423-552-2020. That's my cell phone, or send me a text message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.